Hey everyone, Happy New Year. It's Blair here at Time Trades. This is your weekly video for Sunday, January 1st, 2023. Okay, so this is the first video we had in 2 weeks. So let's just update what happened in the last 2 weeks. My last video was on Sunday, the 18th. So everything from this bar here on Monday, the 19th onward was forecast. You can see the yellow line of forecast that I updated in my video on the 18th, and you can see how price matched and lined up with that pretty well, actually. I called for two down waves, the first being the week before Christmas, the second being the week after Christmas. We did end up getting a bounce on Thursday the 22nd into a steeper decline into Wednesday the 28th, extremely bearish sentiment on Wednesday the 28th. That reversed strongly on Thursday the 29th. Now we're in a situation where we got a pretty bullish looking hammer candle here. And I think that is encouraging for the rest of the forecast, which calls for up into mid-January. So I'm going to review a little bit more information here with you before we update this forecast going forward. Okay, so one of the things that I look at is breadth. So let's go and take a look at breadth on the NASDAQ. So this is the NASDAQ futures, and we're showing here the McClellan oscillator calculated using advancing issues and declining issues on the NASDAQ. And you can see we made a higher low on Wednesday the 28th, and then it crossed the zero line here on Friday. So that actually looks pretty positive for the short term going forward on stocks. So it's encouraging heading into the new year to see breadth or the McClellan oscillator crossing the zero line. And similar story in the ES, where we also had a higher low in breadth on Wednesday the 28th, and then crossed the zero line on Thursday and held above it on Friday as well. So this is, I think, encouraging for our go-forward forecast. Let's go take a look at time trades and see what we can learn here on the Qs. So let's take a look at the mass pressure index first. We don't have a mass pressure index on the Qs, but we do on the SPX now. So this is a new addition. The mass pressure index, if you're unfamiliar, it's a composite of the last 10, 20, and 60 years prior. And it's projected as weekly candles here. So the mass pressure index is aligned to the close on the last Friday of the last week here. So you can see that we've got a big green candle coming up on the weekly mass pressure index, actually for the next 2 weeks, really. And again, this is a composite of 3 prior years, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 60 years ago. So this is confirming nicely the big pivot high we've got over here on SPX around January 9th, 10th, 11th. And also what I like to see is this low being made right around where we have this forecast pivot low. So the pivots do seem to align nicely with current price action and the mass pressure index, which is great. The other thing that we're seeing here is an increase in moves down and probabilities of moves down. Now, this is contradicting the mass pressure index. However, remember, these can invert. So one of the things I'm looking for, given the positive breadth, given the way things closed on Friday, is that this does indeed invert, and we do head up into at least January 9th, 10th, 11th in that range there. Okay, let's take a look at the Dow. The Dow also has a mass pressure index on it, so we can turn that on. Let's turn on magic levels. Similar story here. We've got a positive green candle, two positive green candles on the weekly mass pressure index, and that's also coming off a nice pivot low here. We do have some green candles in the forecast here, January 10th, so that's confirming what we're seeing here. And if the move is proportional to what we've seen in prior years, then we'd be coming up to about the 35,000 level and tagging that orange magic level. Okay, so that is aligning nicely. We can go back to the Qs and take a look there to see what we can learn. And what we have here is a big pivot low December 30th. So that was Friday. And we've got a few green candles here in mid-January. We also have some pivot high candles on January 9th, 10th, 11th. Some low probability move down candles here. They're pretty low probability though. I'm just going to ignore those. What I'm looking for though is a move up into at least January 9th, 10th, 11th in this time frame, because it looks like we have successfully retested this magic level down here at 260 for the third time, and breadth is improving nicely off of that. So I think some of the bear sentiment needs to come off. It's likely we'll see a short covering rally as we head into early January. That being said, I do not think this is the start of any new massive bull market yet. We are still in the time frame of financial panics as determined by the location of the north node. So the moon's north node is where the moon crosses the ecliptic plane in or heading north or heading in onto the northern hemisphere of the ecliptic plane. So what Connie Brown has found, and this is based on her great book, The 32nd Jewel. So I highly recommend picking up this book. It's very much worth the investment. And this shows the location of where most financial panics tend to happen. And we're in that zone. The North Node has moved a little bit closer to Aries. It's still in Taurus here at about 10 degrees Taurus. So it's moved to right about where my cursor is right here. So the North Node is definitely still in that hot zone for financial panic. So that's something to be aware of. And certainly the macro story continues to be relatively negative out there with increasing interest rates. But we need to temper that and not over-rotate too much on the bearish side and just take things one step at a time here. So I wanted to share that with you. Definitely be aware of that, of the location of the North Node. It won't be in Gemini and in this kind of outside of this hot zone until January 2025. So we've got, a couple more years to navigate this high risk area right now. So important to be nimble while the node is still in that hot zone. Okay, so that being said, let's go back to TradingView. We're going to update our forecast here. So let's go to this tab. And this is the forecast line that we built in our last video on the 18th. I think that is still generally pretty accurate. One of the things I'm going to do here, though, is just update it a little bit. I'm going to drag it over because we saw that cluster of pivot highs around the 9th. I'm going to drag it over to Monday the 9th here and keep it up around, sort of where we saw some prior highs. Although I don't really focus too much on levels, I'm focusing mostly on time. And we've got a nice confirmation of this likely move up in the improving breadth numbers there. So this will be our updated forecast going forward. Next week, we've got a number of news items hitting. Wednesday, we've got the FOMC meeting minutes at 2 o'clock. Eastern time, and then Thursday, January 5th, jobless claims at 8:30 a.m. Eastern before the market opens. And then Friday, we've got non-farm payrolls. So those are a couple of events that could move the markets next week. Definitely be aware of those if you're holding risk overnight. So there's our updated forecast, and we'll just make that a little bit more visible here. Okay, good. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about major tech stocks. So we can go over and take a look at, let's take a look at Apple and Google and Microsoft in time trades to see what time trades is saying about those. So Apple over here, we've got a pretty big pivot high coming up January 5th, 6th, 7th. Or 5th, 6th, and 9th. So 9th being a Monday. So that is kind of in line with where some of the other pivot highs are that we're seeing. We can take a quick look at Google here. Google is showing a pivot high in similar timeframes, but also a bigger one over on February 1st. So this is interesting. And that is in line with a large cluster of move up probabilities. So something to keep in mind there for Google. Also to keep in mind that these can invert, right? So this is kind of contradictory with what we're seeing in the mass pressure index, which shows a high roughly around mid-January and then a move down. So one of these obviously is going to be wrong. It's up to us to interpret price correctly and wait for confirmations to ensure that we're on the right side of the market. And we can take a look at Microsoft, another big tech stock here. So this is showing a large move down on January 9th. So again, we need to be wary of these inversions. This one also is contradicting what we're seeing in the mass pressure index and also in the breadth numbers. So the forecast that we just sketched out is actually assuming that these red bars are going to invert and become a move up in reality. And then we've got this pivot high over here, January 23rd, and then we've got a big cluster of pivot lows over here, February 15th. So something to watch pretty closely here on Microsoft. But looking further ahead into March, we've got a nice big cluster of green starting in early March. So it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, because this aligns nicely with some of what we're seeing in the longer term aspects of the mass pressure index is potential for a bullish move up starting in March. Okay, so that's Microsoft. Let's take a look at the dollar and the metals, because these are pretty interesting and of course have a huge influence on the market. Now the dollar has been really bearish ever since it made that high over here in late September at 114, and the forecast calls for continued bearish moves down. There's not much in terms of forecast pivot lows here. This pivot low came in on December 13th, and often there's a little bit more of a bounce, but this is a really weak bounce here coming off of this. So we also see increasing probabilities of moves down heading into early February. Again, pretty bearish look for the dollar here. So that, of course, leads to looking at the metals. Gold has a corresponding bullish setup. So this confirms the bearish dollar forecast somewhat. Of course, it doesn't confirm it in price, just confirms it, logically in terms of all the forecasts fitting together. Let's take a look at silver here as well. Silver also has a cluster of green, a little bit more sporadic though, around January 10th to January 27th. So sort of like the second half of January here. So I'm going to keep my eye on the metals. I think they've got the potential to move up, as it looks like the dollar has potential to move down more. Let's take a look at our friend UNG. UNG has been just relentlessly grinding down here. We have that cold spat and in North America, but after that the forecast models and the demand has dropped off precipitously. So the weather just is not very supportive of natural gas price at the moment. Honestly, I don't see a great setup here either way. I'm just going to hang out and wait to see what price does and see if there's some opportunities to potentially enter long. We see some pivot highs here around January 9th and also January 23rd. So I'm just going to be watching UNG for the near future. Let's take a look at crypto. We've got Bitcoin is just hanging out here between the two magic levels at 17,000 and 16,283. And this is maybe one of those situations where just going sideways is a win, just consolidating here in this price range. What we do see is a slightly bullish bias in the forecast, with a reasonably high probability of a pivot high over here on January 22nd. So let's take a look at what else is going on in the Bitcoin, in the crypto market, starting with Ethereum. Ethereum's got a nice cluster of move up probabilities here, with pivot high around January 10th, only about 27% though, followed by some bearish action there. So Bitcoin might be a tactical long here coming up soon. One of my favorite coins is Litecoin, and this lost the white magic level over here at 76, but it stabilized pretty well. And this pivot low over here in late December seems to have been confirmed by price. So next up, we've got a pivot high coming up January 3rd. So that's coming up really soon. It's an opportunity to maybe look for a tactical long here on Litecoin. One of the plays I like to do is look for a retest of magic levels after they cross. So I can see here that we had a cross of the 76 white magic level, but that has not been retested yet. So I would not be surprised to see Litecoin come back and tag that 76 level sometime in the next week here. Okay, so let's wrap things up with a quick look at the Nifty. Now, the Nifty has been in correction mode for the last few weeks, but after this blue Gann wave here that hit on December 27th, it's been recovering pretty well. And in my opinion, the recovery is going to continue into January 18th, because we have that nice little cluster of green up days, followed by a pivot high on the 18th. So looks like a tactical long opportunity here on the Nifty. Let's take a look at the Bank Nifty. Similar story. We've got a cluster of green moves up into a cluster of pivot highs that ends on January 25th. So again, opportunity for a tactical long for maybe 2 to 3 weeks here on the Bank Nifty. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Welcome back to 2023. Let's have a great year together. Thank you again for using Time Trades, and we'll talk to you next week.